Hi everyone. My name is Paul. I work for the British Red Cross as a data culture and community manager, and part of my role is supporting our international teams to really build data information management, GIS, into their programs in order to really support the national societies or Red Crosses and Red Crescents around the world that we partner with. But before I kind of get into my presentation, just a show of hands, who thinks they know what the Red Cross is and everything to do with the Red Cross? Oh, I don't know. You've all heard of them. You've all heard of us, right? But I will go into a little bit more detail, and hopefully there might be some new bits that potentially you may not know about us. So the Red Cross movement is, in fact, the world's largest humanitarian movement. It is global, and we have a massive strength. Therefore, covering every single or most countries across the world. However, when it comes to describing what we actually do, this can be a little bit more difficult to explain. There are a number of different Red Crosses and Red Crescents around the world. So, first of all, I'm going to start in the top left and just kind of introduce the International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC, who you may have seen their logo around previously. So they were formed in around 1863 and really have a remit to cover kind of armed conflict and kind of upholding international law, humanitarian law, which they continue to do today. And then kind of born out of this came what we call national societies, but are Red Crosses and Red Crescents around the world. And they really have that responsibility of kind of looking after the vulnerable communities and people within their own borders, but also contribute to kind of the global movement that is the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. So with their neighbours. And then we also have what we call the IFRC, or the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent, which was born after World War I in order to kind of help coordinate all of these different Red Crosses and Red Crescents that we have around the world. So hopefully that introduces a little bit more around kind of who we are and what we do, and why potentially some Red Crosses and Red Crescents may be more specialized in some areas versus others. So I'm going to move on to kind of the title of this talk, which is around a disaster management program in Nigeria. And the British Red Cross partners with the Nigerian Red Cross. And we run a disaster management program there across 5 states in Nigeria. And this program was really born out of flooding, which occurred in 2018 and 2019, which was incredibly large scale. And the learning from these floods was that kind of it presented an opportunity to support and work with the Nigerian Red Cross from the British Red Cross side, to really be able to support them in preparing for and also to respond to kind of crises and emergencies in Nigeria, and also work directly with the communities that are affected. So the program that we run and have run over the past 5 years and is continuing to run, so we're aiming that communities or target communities are more kind of resilient and have the capacity to be really able to kind of prepare for, respond to, and also recover from crises that may hit them and that are potentially aggravated by climate change. And then secondly, the second bullet point here, which is that we're really able, the Nigerian Red Cross is really able to kind of deploy, collect, analyze, and make decisions from assessment data, so information around kind of the needs of communities, the scope, the scale of an emergency, and yeah, be able to kind of make decisions off of that data. But have to put in a map somewhere. The program I mentioned in 5 states, these are on the map on the left-hand side of the screen. And in each of these states, we work with 4 different communities. And since this year, we're expanding the number of communities that we're working in each of those states. But what do I mean when I say disaster management? What exactly is disaster management? And it really is the process to kind of prevent, prepare for, respond to, and also recover from disasters, and includes things like, or terms like risk reduction, or preparedness, or anticipatory action, or emergency response and recovery. And it focuses on vulnerable communities. But now, where does OpenStreetMap essentially come into play? We aim really to kind of strengthen the Nigerian Red Cross's capacity and support services during disaster response. Really to be able to conduct more effective needs assessments, so really identifying what are the needs of a community before and after a crisis. And really to inform our decision making. And we structured our approach using something called a Data Readiness framework, and I will take you all through that in just a mo. But before I get into that, I did want to play a quick video, which hopefully will bring to life the program that we're running, and some later slides and pictures which I'll show you. I'm hoping that the volume will work.
Nítorí pé ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ ìgbà ni omi máa ń dà wá láàmú tó pọ̀ gan-an tó jẹ́ pé tí àkókò mìíràn bá dé nísìnyí bẹ́ẹ̀ dúró yẹn nílé dúró síbẹ̀. Gbogbo àwọn blọ́ọ̀kù tí wọ́n ṣe sílẹ̀ lẹ̀ yìí gbogbo ẹ̀ pátápátá ni omi máa bò lórí pé omi máa dé ìlàjì wíńdò tó jẹ́ pé everybody máa sá àsálà fún àwọn ọmọ nílé lọ sí school wọn nílé lọ sí lẹ́sìn wọn nílé ṣe ẹni tàwọn àgbo nílé tajà níbi tí omi yẹn máa pọ̀ dé.
With the help of the Red Cross, they have sensitized us on where and how to handle the situation when the flooding comes, how to rescue people's life.
Lára ṣe Red Cross ni o, tí wọ́n lè fi rescue àwọn èèyàn.
Cool. So that was a community that we work with in Lagos that floods basically every year. British Red Cross has been working with the Nigerian Red Cross to be able to support this community over the past 5 years. And some of the activities that we've been doing have been in this community as well. So, when I talk about data readiness and kind of using OpenStreetMap in that, I'm also trying to answer the question, are we essentially data ready? So when it comes to disaster response, are you as a community data ready? Are we as a Red Cross data ready and ready to respond and ready to prepare for and work with communities that are affected by crises? So, as mentioned before, we used a framework called Data Readiness, which is really the ability for national societies such as British Red Cross or Nigerian Red Cross to really be able to use data and information for humanitarian programs and operations such as disaster responses. And it's made up of 3 separate components, of which OpenStreetMap and mapping is part of. So data literacy, data readiness, data preparedness, and data-driven decision-making. Data literacy really being the skills, attitudes, culture of a Red Cross, being able to work with and understand what data is and what mapping is and what GIS is and OpenStreetMap even. To then data preparedness, which is really the ability to kind of responsibly and effectively use and manage all of this data and information that we have. and the different tools and the different kind of strategies to use that. And then lastly, we have kind of decision making, which is really all about the integrating analytical thinking into ways of working. All really with that goal of timely and quality information. So, we're getting to OSM now. So the first step, as I mentioned, was around kind of data literacy, and really we used OpenStreetMap as that cornerstone to really build up data knowledge and awareness within the Nigerian Red Cross. We introduced the Nigerian Red Cross to OpenStreetMap and its tagging scheme to really look at how well-structured kind of and tagged data can really be turned into a visual format with OpenStreetMap. And we ran a series of mapathons, so you can see a couple of pictures here, with staff and volunteers, because the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement is primarily made up of volunteers around the world. And really to build out and map the communities that we were working in, some of which were not on any map. They weren't known to kind of local authorities unless you're actually there. So we essentially mapped out all of these communities using the ID editor through a number of mapathons. And secondly, we worked with these staff and volunteers to kind of understand what they were adding was a kind of database structure and why well-formatted data is important. And working through and using OpenStreetMap and the ID editor is much more interesting than going through and going through spreadsheets or databases and explaining why it's important. Having it available in a visual format solved or help solve the challenge of data quality. And these maps were essentially going to be used as part of what the Red Cross calls a vulnerability and capacity assessment, which is really a participatory process with the communities that we work with to really understand what risks they face and to come up with mitigating strategies to be able to respond to or prepare for risks and work with different stakeholders to achieve that. And part of that is a community mapping exercise, which I'll go to in a minute. But we also used other different kind of tools within this, at this stage. One being something called a data playbook, which the IFRC has curated with a number of different Red Crosses and Red Crescents globally, which has about like 120 different exercises, games, activities to really kind of build up data and information knowledge within the different Red Crosses globally. So you can start to see that with this activity, we're building that data culture, we're building that data knowledge. Which brings us kind of to the next step, which is this data preparedness activity. And here, the Nigerian Red Cross started to conduct community mapping in the communities that we serve. So here's a number of different pictures. As part of this vulnerability and capacity assessment that I mentioned earlier. And to enable this activity, we essentially use a number of different tools and methods. So we use mobile data collection using Kobo Toolbox, which is built off of Open Data Kit or ODK, which is an open source software, which is essentially like mobile surveys. And not only really does this tool serve as a tool which you can use for community mapping purposes, but it's also the tool of choice that the Nigerian Red Cross used during disaster response. So using and building the knowledge of this tool with a larger number of people and a larger number of staff and volunteers during peacetime or not disaster time means that we're essentially building that knowledge bank within the local branch and local communities. And And one way we're also building this kind of data knowledge is really through that OSM tagging data model, which I mentioned earlier. So on screen, you can see a number of different pictures where the Nigerian Red Cross basically walked around the community with the community members themselves, tagging features which were capacities, so beneficial to the communities, or also vulnerabilities. So what are those challenges within the community? They can be points of interest, such as schools, health clinics, but they can also be other features, such as natural features, such as streams or rivers, which may flood as well. So, after community mapping had taken place, we essentially started to build out an initial map, a first map that kind of showed what the community members and the Nigerian Red Cross had walked around the community had recorded. And what we essentially then did was have a number of different kind of focus groups or where people came together to verify what was put on those maps. Was it representative of all the community members' views? Was that health facility really a capacity? Was it a vulnerability? Or was it both a capacity and a vulnerability? And we're essentially including a wider number of people that possibly were not able to join that kind of community mapping exercise. After this, we also, you can see, added any public information and public data into OpenStreetMap. So it's there, it's recorded, and the community members can update and change it as they want, as we're also working with them to essentially show kind of OpenStreetMap and its value. And this is really especially useful in those urban or semi-urban environments where change is a lot more likely and happens at a faster pace. These maps were then kind of printed out and shared with the communities and also wider stakeholders. And this leads us to kind of that third step being data-driven decision-making. So combined with different other tools and activities as part of that vulnerability and capacity assessment, at that community. These offline and online maps could essentially be used to inform kind of disaster risk mitigation measures with a number of stakeholders. So it could be related to kind of infrastructure planning, or it could be related to contingency plans or other advocacy by the community for different kind of infrastructure or services. And in addition, the Nigerian Red Cross have this data that's available to them to use during and before crises. So really using OpenStreetMap and working with the Nigerian Red Cross, the British Red Cross has partnered with, we're really able to build their data literacy and really become more data prepared and really be able to use this and interpret the OpenStreetMap data and other data sets as well in their decision making. So, what now? So data really is that kind of team sport, and Nigerian Red Cross still continue with OpenStreetMap and community mapping within this disaster management program and emergency response. They work with different branches and at headquarters level to really drive kind of data knowledge and data culture. And I put on screen a couple of quotes from different branches that we've worked with and kind of how they've essentially used data, used information, and used OpenStreetMap to really inform their own disaster response at a local level. So beyond that program. Beyond the program that I've mentioned. So it's from communicating kind of what their activities are to informing kind of disaster response activities and distributions. And since this initial work, the Nigerian Red Cross, beyond any work of the British Red Cross, have essentially collected, I want to say, approximately 2,000 points of interest, 2,000 points which are map data specific, across 16 different states. So they've used and worked with OpenStreetMap beyond the program. And in addition to really kind of, in addition to kind of collecting these different points of interest, they're also really looking to different tools and methods to really expand how and what they work with and the different processes and different tools. And so they've explored the use of map swipe. So in a couple of places in Nigeria, there have been AI buildings which have been essentially added into OpenStreetMap. They're looking at how map swipe and specifically the validate project type can be used to verify what has been added to OpenStreetMap. Secondly, mapillary. So in a number of different communities that the Nigerian Red Cross work in, and also British Red Cross with the Nigerian Red Cross, there is a map literacy gap where communities, whilst they have a map available to them, some individuals are unable to read those maps and therefore are kind of excluded from stakeholder conversations which might center around map information. So how can we essentially use street-level data to add to what we've already collected that then they can work with, then it includes a wider group of people in those conversations. Thirdly, we continue to build kind of capacity at a branch level, at this state level. And we've seen during different disaster responses, so I think about a year ago there was widespread flooding in northeastern Nigeria. And because we have built that capacity at headquarters and in a number of branches, they were able to really inform disaster response and also question and work with different operations managers who coordinate a response in asking and using the different maps which they produced and identify kind of the questions and be able to ask the operations manager, what do you need from these map information? Like, we can put these different layers together. We can use OpenStreetMap. And during that, we coordinated with, or Nigerian Red Cross coordinated with the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. And lastly, the 5 states that the British Red Cross and Nigerian Red Cross worked with have developed and worked with the communities themselves in order to identify what challenges they face and how can maps be used in order to benefit those communities. So one being mapillary. Secondly, there are others which are looking at kind of individual household flood depths and where those vulnerable people live, and also evacuation routes. So how can we combine all those different layers together in order to be able to respond more effectively? And kind of to really finish this off, I know I'm slightly over time. So I really just wanted to leave you with a simple message, which is that kind of being data ready is not a destination, it's rather a journey. And it's really about building the capacities of individuals, of people, of communities, and really working with them to really understand their needs and be able to work with them to on that journey. And crucially, here we used kind of OpenStreetMap as that cornerstone, but whilst I mentioned it as a tool, it really was a tool for kind of inclusion and collaboration with people. And I put a number I put all of the Red Cross, Red Crescent fundamental principles at the side here, which really kind of were involved in this kind of program and activity. That's it from me. My contact detail is here. I'm also with my colleague David, who's not in this room, but in a different room currently. So yeah, feel free to grab either of us if you want to chat further. Thank you. Questions? Comments? Blue person, yes.
Thank you very much for your presentation. The more I listen about the Red Cross, Red Cross entity, the more I learn. So I will definitely say I still don't know what the amount of activity you do that. So thank you for the presentation. You talk about data readiness, and probably this is a question more a reflection than a question. It's about the changes in these territories, in this country. So Nigeria is urbanizing very rapidly. So how often do you perform these activities, and how fast the situation changes in these areas that you work with, and how you cope with those changes from the mapping perspective?
Okay, cool. So it's the question is about how frequently we have to do these activities, and yeah. So in Nigerian Red Cross and this program, in the first couple of years, we specifically worked with people at kind of headquarters level and a number of branches. So 3 branches out of those 5 that I mentioned. And it was a lot of kind of heavy lifting at the start and building their knowledge and capacity. But since they've expanded the program, the effort from kind of British Red Cross and my side has decreased as they're becoming more confident, and it gives the power to them to really build up their own capacity. For example, I supported this program, but do I know Nigeria? I don't know I don't know Nigeria and the challenges that they face as well as they do. So, for example, like when I mentioned that the communities work with those branches to come up with potential projects to kind of solve those community challenges, that's with them, and we are then supporting those people. But yeah, it all depends on different Red Crosses that we work with. This is just one example, but yeah, the real aim is to give them the ownership, yeah, in the long term. Cool. I got one more question apparently. Yes.
I was also mapping a lot in Nigeria, mostly power infrastructure as part of Map-a-Grid, and I wonder, what satellite imagery actually are you using? Because what I've experienced is in the whole region, one of the biggest issues is just that actually Bing and Esri is really hard to use, and you need to be very experienced to use this imagery. So for beginners, it's a nightmare to map in this area, and I think one of the biggest things for this area would actually be to have better open satellite imagery or aerial imagery. If there's any activity to improve this imagery in the whole sub-Sahara area, or if you know what are the challenges there. I know there's also a physical problem to do imagery there because a lot of clouds and stuff, but I feel still that compared to 240 million people living there, the imagery is unusable in many cases.
Yeah, so the question there is around kind of the image quality when looking at satellite imagery, and also kind of how we essentially solve the challenge of potentially some poor imagery at that beginner level. We were quite lucky, I would say, with the communities that we worked in and the state of the imagery. So, for example, a number of communities were in Lagos, another bunch of communities were in the Federal Capital Territory, so Abuja, which is the capital of Nigeria. So the quality there was high, and updates were fairly frequent. In a couple of other areas, the quality was poorer, but not poor enough that it was unusable. So there we just had more directed mapathon activities and really worked with the staff and volunteers for those. So it was a lot more kind of hands-on question answer with the mapathon people. Yeah.
There's no attempt to increase or improve the imagery in these areas.
I mean, as part of British Red Cross and Nigerian Red Cross, we're not planning to kind of work and improve the satellite or aerial imagery using drones or anything like that. That's not currently in our plans. But yeah. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.